Good morning, everyone. We wanted to start this morning just by getting an idea who's in the room today. What states are you from? What community health centers are you from? Just roughly, if people are sitting grouped together. Anyone volunteer some information? Anyone from Oregon? Yeah, where are you guys from? Great. All of you guys? Great. Great. From Washington? One Washington person.
Back here.
Oh, back here.
Oh,
okay.
and you.
Which? House Point. Great. Idaho? Hi, Idaho. Where are you guys from?
Well, Madison County Health Center, Council.
I did a rotation with you guys in school. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. There was some folks from Alaska. Any? Alaska? Yeah.
I know, if you're going to leave, I guess, like, everybody come together.
Where in Alaska? Great. Everyone's from Anchorage? Cool. Where are you from? Cool.
Eastern Aleutian tribes.
You're way out there on the train. It's great. And where are you from?
I'm from Idaho.
Yeah.
From my Northwest, Southwest, and Southeast Idaho.
All right. Okay. Montana? Oh. We have a lot of, how many different health centers in Montana?
I'm from Northwest Community Health Center.
Harbor, Montana.
Okay.
Yeah, Montana, South Montana. The least one,
Great. Well, any other states we missed? There was someone from Utah we met out there. From California. Where in California? All right. Which community health center? Northeastern. Okay. All right.
Colorado, Northwestern, part of Colorado.
Great. Southern Mushrooms. Okay. Welcome. North Dakota. And South Dakota. We have a great representation of the West here.
Wyoming.
And Wyoming. Hello.
Yeah.
And where are you from?
South Dakota.
South Dakota as well. Great. Anyone that we missed that wants to speak up? All right. So we have a lot of experience in CHCs as well as you do. And one of the things when we came together as a team to work on quality improvement, really discuss what were some of the challenges that all the CHCs that we've worked for have faced. And some of the big pieces were really like we really looked at these three questions. And the first is like, do you struggle with sustainable clinical quality improvements? We all said yes to that question. Have you invested in making improvements that are only realized for the short term? You do this big effort for 1 or 2 months, maybe 6 months, and then things fall off track because no one's paying attention to it after that. You made your improvement. And have you wondered how to keep employees accountable for the changes that we all strive for? And these were questions that we really used to help guide what we've built at the Richmond Clinic. So answering these questions really takes organizational change, a commitment to change, and performance monitoring. And today we are going to discuss the challenges and the solutions for that. While we think about how to engage our payers in pay for performance measures and in showing improvement in quality.
I probably need to be a little bit louder. So today we also want to say that this is a really nice sized group, so feel free. We are happy to have discussion as we go through this or answer questions or think about questions that we might all want to talk about later. And then we're also going to kind of tag team and flow in between things. Can you hear me okay or not? Fix me. Okay. So the things that we'll be sure we touch on today is just to give you an idea of more of the model at the Richmond Clinic, and a little bit about our medical home journey and the work that we've done around understanding population health and transformation efforts, especially from our Oregon perspective, and how those things have led to clinical quality improvements in our clinic. And the capacity building we've been doing to do that, hopefully give you some ideas and different ways to think about it in your health centers, and introduce some of the data-driven improvements and results that we've achieved. So this is kind of a history of our medical home journey. We were one of a handful of community health centers in the mid-2000s, like maybe 2006, who went to visit the South Central Foundation in Alaska. And a kind of tri-county area group of representatives went up, observed their NUCA system of care, and that got us all really excited about what we called primary care renewal. And that's how we started our journey towards becoming a recognized patient-centered medical home. So at Richmond, we have been there we just celebrated our 20 years. We're in Southeast Portland, pretty close in. We have been an official FQHC since June 2012. We were a lookalike prior to that. And we are averaging about 52,000 visits and about over 12,000 patients we would consider our active patients. A little more than that who've kind of just have come in and out. So as part of our primary care redesign efforts, we implemented co-located care teams. We'll talk more about these roles later, but our care teams are broken into what we call 4 pods. So in a pod there are PCPs, a nurse care manager, the medical assistants, a team coordinator, and a social worker, which we call a behavioral health consultant. And again, we'll get into these roles a little bit more. In 2011, our state developed a patient-centered primary care home recognition program of its own. So we applied for that and achieved the top tier 3 status in 2011. And so just to give a picture of what things are looking like in Oregon prior to 2014, our Medicaid, we were seeing about 42% Medicaid and about 15% uninsured. And now at the Richmond Clinic, we are serving about 60% of Medicaid population, 20% Medicare, which is pretty high, I feel like. We have a lot of demand from Medicare patients. And now just right around 5% uninsured. And we have a portion of the commercial population who are mostly OHSU employees and dependents. We also have a pretty tight, because we're in Southeast Portland, we have a pretty tight service area. So sometimes that gets a little bit, the boundary can kind of get fuzzy. And in 2013, we entered into a pilot project with our state around reforming the payment system for Medicaid services, and so we have some of our partner clinics now here. So cool, you guys are here. So that is that's called the alternative payment methodology, or APM, where now we are receiving a per member per month payment for our Medicaid patients in lieu of billing fee for service. So that would be for these 60%. So a picture of our care team. It includes roughly about 4 PCP FTEs per pod. That equals more bodies than that. There's between, 7 and 7, maybe average of 7 actual bodies, but the FTE is about 4. And same, there's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio of medical assistants. The nurse care manager, there's about 1.0 FTE per pod. That is really is more than one person. There are different FTEs working that position. The team coordinator role is, I think, pretty unique. It is a sort of a back office admin role. Some of their responsibilities include scrubbing the schedule and the charts of the patients being seen in the pod on that day, doing a lot of normal resulting, lab results, notifications to patients, doing a lot of that paperwork shuffling, And then also performing some panel management activities, especially around outreach. And then the behavioral health consultant is a 1.0 of social worker. And just recently we added clinical pharmacy, and right now that's one person who is spread among the care teams. It's starting off now as a pilot to try to figure out how we integrate that role. So a couple of the other things we have in the clinic is psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners. We provide Suboxone for medication-assisted treatments for people experiencing, opiate dependence, and are doing more and more behavioral health group visits. We also bring in some specialty services, so we have sports medicine on a regular basis coming in, cardiology, ENT, psychiatry, podiatry, and also provide yoga and acupuncture. Super popular services. And those last two are actually, we track the service, but it's provided free. The acupuncture is actually done by our local natural medicine college. And so they actually do, the students come in and do a rotation. Their preceptor is, we have some kind of like faculty type agreement. I guess they're credentialed and privileged with OHSU to do the precepting. And right now I think we are doing about 3 acupuncture clinics a week. And it's done in group acupuncture. So in fact, I think if we could have it every day, it would be full every day. So that was a picture of our care teams and the model that we've been working on, really for these, heavily for the past 7 years, and we're feeling pretty good about, the foundation of our teams is really strong. We've done a lot of work around what those roles do, and we're still doing some revising, especially around the role of the nurse care manager. But that has really helped allow us to work towards the population health and transformation efforts in Oregon, where we are calling the triple aim here the way of achieving better health, better care, and lower costs for our state. And just these are some of the key elements of kind of the model in Oregon and the way we're going about this. And so this work is really supporting primary care infrastructure, we feel like. There's a lot of emphasis and recognition for team-based care. Sorry. And the importance of preventive services, management of chronic conditions, and then all of the work that everybody in this room does around care coordination by primary care homes. And then the last piece is around that performance measurement and monitoring that I was talking about earlier, that there is a component of setting goals, tracking towards those goals to see if we are really working towards this big overarching goal of impacting that triple aim. So that performance measurement is really leading to these things around paying. The state is now paying for outcomes and health improvement. This alternative payment model that I said a little bit about before earlier is a huge change for us, and has been a way that's really kind of given us a little bit of that breathing room to reevaluate and figure out what can we do differently to really make the difference that we want to make. So in our state, we have CCO instead of ACOs, and a CCO in Oregon is really a network of providers, payers, and the state who've all agreed to work together to really make these impacts in our communities. Does that sound like what's happening in your states and communities? Or
No.
not? Oh, ooh, interesting. Okay. So, so as part of this development of the CCOs, there was a set of incentive measures that were created. So those measures really focus on the key goals of the triple aim. So there are a set of process and outcomes measures. There are some patient experience indicators. And then, of course, we all, want to see the total cost of care go down, improve, or at least especially the money being spent for the right things. Reducing, unnecessary hospitalizations or utilization, that type of thing. So this has really helped. These incentive measures are tracked over a calendar year. At the end of the calendar year, based on the performance of the individual CCO, there is a payout that is then shared with the health systems that made the contributions to that performance. So another part of this is the model really encourages collaboration with payers, which I'm really excited about. I feel like this has been a big change, especially in the last year or so, where providers and payers aren't just talking about contracts of, what we get paid per, RVU or whatever, but that we're actually getting together to talk about alternative types of services or visits we want to provide, and then how we could work with them to get paid for doing those things, even though they might not be a traditional, provider type or even face-to-face visit. So, for example, emails with patients, phone calls. We have one of our largest Medicare or Medicaid managed care plans has an expanded fee schedule where clinics who contract to utilize this fee schedule can bill for, say, a nurse care management phone call or behavioral health provided phone call. And I think that will start to make a huge difference. Right now, probably like a lot of you in the room, we're probably doing all of these things just because we know it's the right thing to do and it makes a difference. So, but what we're really seeing is that payers are coming to us and saying, hey, let's talk about other things that we could support you in doing. Our experience with our behavioral health consultants was one of those examples. Right now we are getting a separate per month payment for providing behavioral health services in the clinic, so that those can be anything from a warm handoff to a brief intervention after an expert screening, so that type of thing. And so just to kind of develop maybe a shared understanding for today, this is the definition of population health that we've been using in our approach to this work. So we've really taken responsibility for the health of a defined population and understand and are happy to be accountable for achieving the triple aim objectives to really improve the health of our patients and communities. So just a little bit of a refresh on the triple aim. People have probably seen this a lot before. This is the IHI's kind of visual of the triple aim, showing the improved patient experience and population health and reduced costs, and how all of those things need to be happening simultaneously. Like there's not one thing that's more important than the other. And then in Oregon, we have a fourth aim, we call it, where we are also striving for assuring health equity for all, so that we really believe that every Oregonian should have access to high quality health care.
So when we started working on our improvement model, we really had to look at what our data said. And we thought we were giving pretty good care, and we were, but when we looked at our data, we weren't giving as good a care as we thought we were. And we looked at our colon cancer screening rates, our hypertension control rates, we really had to look at our data to basically create this data point to then drive our population health ideas, what we wanted to do. And it really caused us to, improve our processes, really identify the roles that people needed to play, maybe change some roles or add new roles to the clinic to be able to make that change happen, and work on our partnerships. And all of those combined to work on these sustainable improvements that we created.
Very good. So we started off by really reflecting on our past improvement experience, and this is also maybe one of those things that's kind of shared common experience in the room, but in the past it was really more about tracking and improving mostly process measures. There were some outcomes measures like around diabetes, A1C control. But for us, it was really around like the, annual UDS reporting, which would involve some, in the past chart audits before there was decent EMR data. Now it's the, extract out of the EMR and just kind of track over time the performance. Now, I guess the good thing is it seems like in the last couple of years, HRSA has been recognizing clinics with some of those quality improvement awards. So that's been nice, because I feel like 10 years ago my experience was, I guess we just give the numbers and somebody must look at them, and one day, there may be some recognition for, or, additional motivation for improving, other than we all want healthier patients and communities. We are Joint Commission accredited, so there's all of the kind of more requirements for participation. And then in the clinic, like kind of among the staff in different groups, there were many small PDSAs that would be conducted, maybe pilots of somebody's good idea or a little bit of a pet project. We are also a family medicine residency clinic, so we have residents embedded in our pods, and there would be a lot of times where people would have their little project happening somewhere, and then a pod would say, oh, we thought we were working on this, and we're like, oh, well, that sounds great, but we weren't doing anything to support it other than probably the resident really trying to make a lot of things happen on their own. We have had a QI committee for a long time, but in the past it was sort of more of a brainstorming committee, and not a lot of actionable items would come out of that. It was also, there were so many different roles and kind of staff levels on that committee where at the time I don't believe people really, even knew if data was presented to them in terms of performance, weren't really sure what they were looking at or what they were going, what their kind of job or responsibility was to do in processing that data and information. So, we just want to be really transparent about how we feel like there at that time it was a lot of just doing more in the respect of more of like a quality assurance type activity versus a true commitment to continuous quality improvement. And so we just experienced a lot of or a lack of staff awareness and involvement and engagement in the actual efforts being made. So this is a little bit about what we call our transformed improvement experience and how we built upon the development of our medical home model. So now we definitely feel more aligned with our medical home values. We have done a lot of work with our leadership team around embedding QI into our strategic plan. And we have supported this work with additional clinical leadership. Dan will talk more about that role. But we've also been able to take opportunities for these incentives that are coming for payers to recognize clinical quality improvements. And that's really helped us kind of hone in focus on developing what we need to do to take this accountability for our population, and then just these two pieces that have really been like the key attributes have been the development of the CCO incentive measures and the payment reform work that we've been able to participate in Oregon. So all of that leading up to hopefully more and more value-based care being delivered and supported. Just yesterday, I learned from here in Oregon, our big managed care here is that in the past year, 30% of their payouts to health systems was in the form of incentive dollars. And so the remainder was for the delivery of actual billed services. And I thought that was really, really impressive. I mean, I didn't see what the actual dollar amounts were, but has to be pretty huge because if just Richmond is taking care of about 7,000 of those members and they're throughout the state, it is a huge portion of the Medicare dollars, which is what our state CCO has been allowed to do by the feds. We were able to take the money to go towards Medicaid services, and this has been one of those things that allows some of that flexibility to be innovative and pay for improvements in quality. So this is just a snapshot of what some of these pay-for-performance revenues have looked like in our experience. So again, going back to what I just said about that 30% of the incentive dollars, we are going to be realizing at least $1 million in just pay-for-performance revenues in this fiscal year, and have hit about $800,000 so far in this calendar year 2015, and that is equaling, real dollars that we are reinvesting in the clinic to support our care teams, enhance our services, support all of the work that we are wanting to do more of.
So in terms of taking those dollars that we are starting to get and we started reinvesting them in our infrastructure, one of the first places that we did that was creating this team, this kind of QI quality team, where we had the quality manager, Erin, the clinician lead, myself, and Colleen, the RN care manager. And if your clinic doesn't have these roles, you really should think about creating these roles if it's a possibility, because we found that this was instrumental in being able to have focused time to really put towards these efforts and make them more of a reality. When you think about these roles, some of the key attributes that we think is important to choose someone in your clinic for these roles or hiring for these roles, for the quality manager, it's really looking for someone who has an understanding of the strategic goals and an understanding of health reform, that understands the payer landscape, but also can work within an interdisciplinary team. Someone who feels comfortable working with providers, someone who feels comfortable working with support staff and clinic leadership is really important for that role because of everyone we tend to touch in the clinic when we're doing our improvement measures. Looking at the care manager, you need an RN, ideally, who really understands the big picture of what's going on in the clinic, understands, again, that QI and that strategic plan piece. Someone who has a background in population health and chronic disease management is very helpful to identify that person. And then also someone who has really good rapport with staff, someone who's not threatening the staff, because we found that, for Colleen to be able to work with our staff was a huge piece in their safety around change, basically, and pushing the change process, which there's always a lot of pushback for that. And in terms of clinician lead, one thing that we really found and what we see is that sometimes it's not the best to have it be the medical director. They have so much on their plate that they have a hard time putting that energy towards kind of full-time QI stuff. in terms of their process and what they're thinking about. And so someone who, as a clinician who, again, understands strategic goals, someone who's on the floor, who's seeing patients, who really can see those workflows happening and see the barriers that are happening on the floor in terms of the change you're trying to do, so you can be able to tweak whatever type of workflows that you're doing. And then someone who can be a liaison between the clinical staff, the providers, and the kind of leadership of the clinic.
And for us, this is not a full-time role that we are needing to dedicate more FTE to it, but it's.
I get 4 hours a week, so it's a 0.1 position for this. Yeah. The rest of my time's clinical. Also, in terms of enhancing your infrastructure, definitely clinic manager needs to be on board. But we found having a very strong front office and back office supervisors who we were able to then give some power to be able to, one, help change workflows, and two, be able to hold people accountable and be able to walk down that coaching aspect. If these people in those positions don't have any power, it's really hard to make any change. And so really giving them some freedom in that way to look at that. So we think those are very important pieces. And then having a robust leadership team. And so our leadership team is the medical director, executive director, the clinic manager, our CFO, quality manager, and myself, and our behavioral health lead, basically. And we meet weekly for about an hour and a half weekly to go over kind of the state of the clinic and pushing those things forward.
It's kind of the next piece of our building capacity work was really coming together to define a plan for understanding our data and kind of in where we were at when we started. So we did an inventory of various data sources. So we learned what we could get out of the EMR. We've talked with our payers around what kind of data we could get around just, demographics of our members, utilization of different types of services, and where they're going for what. For you all, there may be opportunities to partner with ACOs, or for us, there's the CCO. And then we have been using our UDS data more too, especially for understanding kind of those local and national baselines and benchmarks, just to get a good idea of where exactly do we land. Earlier on, we did this work to establish our own internal baselines and then set some targets for improvement. So we started with kind of the obvious place of looking for the low-hanging fruit. Where could we kind of get some early wins, get some success under our belt so that the clinic could feel confident in doing more of this work. And then also align those with some of these formal pay-for-performance and incentive programs. And also set some realistic targets. Our biggest pay-for-performance program rewards continuous quality improvement over 6-month periods of time. And there's a pretty low target to meet in that they are expecting continuous 3% improvement in the course of that 6-month period. And then there's another 3% improvement to make over an additional 6 months to total a year. So that has been really beneficial in being able to, see that we could actually make these changes, plan them out, and really see them happen over time. Sometimes I think it's sort of hard for us, especially among the leadership team, when we think, why don't we want to be better than 50% on that thing? And we do want to be better than that, but we do also want to be realistic about what can we actually accomplish and what's going to be sustainable. So just going back to where we started, we definitely took advantage of taking some time to clean up our EMR, establish some documentation workflows, do some abstracting to make sure that we had clean records and actually, complete patient medical histories and medical records in the charts. We did some chart audits to just confirm that the reports were telling us what our performance really was. We've had a lot of success of working with one of our universities to have a regular rotation of interns coming through, practicum experiences that are required as part of these different healthcare management programs. So that's been a great way of getting some of these chart audits done. And so then we took that to review our current performance, to then identify care gaps that were important to our population, look for those opportunities where we could really make especially some process improvements to impact the health status of the patient.
So when we started the process of looking at how we were going to improve, we really needed to identify what project we were going to be taking on and when we wanted to have it completed by. When did we want to show that improvement and really lay out the timeline? And this, we meet weekly as well for anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes weekly to kind of go through this. At the beginning of planning out the process takes a little bit longer. And one of the key pieces here is that traditionally in our past, we wouldn't necessarily identify all the roles in the clinic that were going to be affected by these changes we are making. We kind of said, oh, it's the provider, oh, it's the medical assistant, and it never went beyond that. And what we really did was lay out every role in the clinic and thought about how's it going to touch them and how's it going to affect them? What information do they need? Because the last thing we need is to do an outreach and have someone call on the phone because they got a phone call and the front desk person or a phone person has no idea what they're talking about. And so really educating everyone in the clinic was a big piece of, I think, a lot of our success. We meet, like I said, weekly, and we also include our back office manager with that because it is our medical assistants that are playing a huge role in a lot of the outreach that we do, and making a big distinction between, are we doing an outreach? Are we phoning people? Are we writing letters? What are we doing to contact people? Or are we doing an improvement process that's just seeing the patients that are coming into the clinic and getting an idea of how we want to do that? And that's a big piece too. It really depends, really defines how you go about these processes. In terms of looking at documentation, we'll go over in a little bit about what some of our documentation looks like. But we have a very robust, thought out documentation process. One of the big barriers that we saw is that in past improvement processes that were tried in the clinic, it was often the medical assistants would get a list, please call these patients. It was overwhelming. They got a list of 30 people. They had no idea what to do. They had a lot of stress and anxiety about it. It didn't get done, and if it did get done, it rarely got done well. And there was a lot of pushback around that. And so looking at our past experience of doing it that way, had to think about what's going to be realistic, what's going to be sustainable. And talking with the medical assistants about how we want to do this process, we actually came up to be like, if we did an outreach, it's 5 patients per week. Is all each person has to call or contact, and made it very realistic. To me, 5 patients per week, per day could be easy, okay? But to really, on top of the extra duties, to make it in this way sustainable, we agreed upon 5 per week. And at first, some people were like, I can't do 5. 5 per week is way too much. You're asking too much of us. Now everyone's used to the process, and it's very doable. And most people just get them done in the first day and whatnot. Yeah.
So, give me an idea of what you're calling about. Is some project, some class, what are they calling about?
Oh yeah, should we?
We're
do
gonna.
that?
Yeah. So we're gonna get there in 1 second. Okay.
Who manages, so you have this big list of 30 patients, so who is the person that's managing that list and telling those MAs that you have these 5 patients?
So Colleen manages that list and is in charge of disseminating that list to people every week. We often use our team coordinators as well in doing that list. One of the big things we did in terms of planning for this improvement is we started a monthly meeting just with back office staff. And we started this, we started this basically to help really invigorate this idea that our clinic is changing in its focus. Our clinic is really focused on quality improvement. And we also think that monthly lunchtime 1 hour meeting has been really helpful in what we've done.
Great. Yeah, and I think you two are, Colleen is going to be a big help in these couple of questions. So, but this is just one of our tools, and I guess it doesn't look too bad up there. So this is just one of our planning sheets where we documented the measure. We have more of a definition of kind of behind the scenes of what exactly are all the details of the numerator denominator, but this just serves as a snapshot of, for example, this first one on the colorectal cancer screening, who the population is, what our current performance is. So starting at 56% for a 6-month period, we wanted to improve by 3%. So getting to 59%. At the top of this page, we have just a little couple reminders of what is it that's driving this work. And then a quick snapshot of the required workflow documentation, so some of the things that we would be tracking and looking to tell us that these things were happening. And just some other notes around planning. Oh, great. Ooh, Colleen steals the show now.
There we go. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the tools that we do for the back office staff or who is ever involved in the outreach. And like Dan had mentioned, we knew that there had been previous projects where people had been given just lists of patients, and there hadn't been a lot of success with that. And what we know was that in our back office staff, there was a varying degree of the comfort that people had in doing these calls. Maybe some people weren't really interested in that. That's not something we've done in the past. We've asked our medical assistants to do, and they'd really like to just keep doing what they do. And the clinic is changing, and we're asking them to do that. So we worked on coming up with education and a process for everybody. So we have a standard process for each outreach project. And so each team member who's involved in the process gets sort of what the system is going to be. So that includes a standard with dot phrases that, so when they go to do their charting, they enter in the dot phrase according to if they got a hold of the patient, if they left a message, if the phone isn't working anymore. And so it helps standardize what people see. So say a back office team member calls, there's a standard entry into the medical chart, and then when the front office gets the patient calling back, it tells them what they should do about the outreach process and how to help the patient. Other things we have that we gave them were scripting, sort of how to have good customer service, identifying yourself, identifying the patient, why you're calling, that you're calling on behalf of their primary care provider. And so we gave a standard scripting. And each outreach process that we do, we sort of build on the same core blocks of things. So it's become really familiar to the back office staff and the front office staff. They recognize the routine.
What is a dot phrase? Is that something in your electronic health record that they just click on and it
is.
puts in a...
So they would do the dot FMR and say CRC, and then all the dot phrases really in the colon cancer outreach come up, and they pick the one that they need.
So something we wrote, something we saved,
right.
We gave them instructions to use. Yeah.
But so it, and then also in some of them, like when we did developmental screening, the dot phrase actually helps them work through the steps of deciding which developmental test they need. So and then we also have instructions on just how to send out the letter. If you send a MyChart message, what's the appropriate time if the patient hasn't looked at the MyChart message? Because in our system, we can set a date that if they haven't read it, it comes back to you that says they've never looked at this. So we do that. On some of the outreach projects that we did, we realized that our staff maybe needed more education on it. Again, I used the developmental screen. So we actually did one-on-one training with each staff member. And we had, just like when you start a new job and you have an orientation sheet, we had a check-off orientation sheet that the trainer went over with the back office team. And then the MA signed off that they felt comfortable in doing the outreach project process. And if they didn't, then we gave them more training until they reached a comfort level of being able to do it.
I have a question about hit button voicemails. Well, okay, this is.
Right.
What can you say, what can't you say?
Right. So we have scripting for them that they just ask to call back to a number if it's not an identifiable voicemail. So they have different scenarios according to what it is that they hear when they call. So then the worksheet that people get. This would be sort of what it would look like. There would be patients' names on here, medical record numbers. There would be 5 patients. So that on the process, it's outlined that they'll get their sheets every Monday, and that they need to be returned to our team coordinators every Friday or Saturday, depending on what their weekends. And so then usually Monday mornings, I go around and hand out sheets to people. It's a really good time for me to be able to just touch base, see how things are going. And when I first handed out sheets, I got lots of comments and, what their barriers were or the problems they were having, or they'd been too busy, or, and now when I hand them out, people are just sort of telling me about their lives lots of times, not necessarily about the sheet, or here you come with another sheet, or in time, it's really changed and a much more pleasant process on Monday mornings. But, so we do have some people who still struggle sometimes to get it done. So every week I do a check sheet if people turned it in. If they haven't turned it in, then I usually go talk to them about that they hadn't gotten their sheet. And if there continues to be an issue, then I go to the back office supervisor and she helps them with completing this expectation. So.
I think also to touch just a little bit on like who's doing this work of, like you said, Colleen is putting these patient lists together and doing the disseminating, but we are using mostly a disease registry or other population management tool where we're extracting out, the patients who are meeting the criteria. Colleen takes that, subset of the patients and then creates a worksheet that includes these different elements that the MEs prefer to actually have a paper copy that then they write in, fill in the blanks. We've tried, Excel versions that we kind of thought, wouldn't that be easier? But people are like, oh no.
And then we try to match them because we have teams, so our MAs are paired up with different providers. So if possible, we try to match them with their providers. So maybe they're calling people they know because we're all about relationships. So then they're maybe calling patients that they've seen in the clinic before or something, or maybe they know a little bit about them. So we also try to do that. I think that's
Question.
So this sheet helps us clean up, as you can see, it talks about people no longer being a patient. They can write comments. So I go through the sheets every week that they turn in. There's a process in our system for them to notify someone when their people aren't a patient anymore. That doesn't always happen, so I just usually do a double check on that. So it helps us clean up our registries. If they write like something's happening about that patient, then I make sure it gets sent on to the appropriate person.
Sometimes there will be so-and-so is in Mexico for 6
Right.
months. They
Yeah.
won't be back until,
Yeah, so we try
don't
to
call them.
so we try to note those things. So that it's helped us slowly work through a lot of people.
So what happens with these sheets of paper? They have patients' names and stuff, so they're sort of HIPAA.
Right. So
They shred it, they kept somewhere locked up.
they're kept locked up. So, and at this point, we still are keeping the outreach process sheets, but they're in a locked area.
You mentioned the EHR.
We're using Ochin. It's a version of Epic.
And then in terms of some of that cleanup in the panel management kind of process. We have included some chart scrubbing into this process for the MAs too, so they're doing a little bit of scrubbing in advance of calling the patient, depending on what the kind of either outreach or topic is.
So the data usually has been run maybe a few weeks, maybe a month before it finally gets down to the MAs, or I've worked through the list that far. So in the process, we're always asking the MAs to go into the chart and make sure that whatever we're calling about hasn't occurred, so that patients feel like we're paying attention to what's happening to them.
I was just curious of the terminology you talked about OSHA as a part of EPIC. Is it similar or different to the one that I know in Providence has been floating around last anyway? What's the community?
So our Providence is on Epic.
Where does it say Providence?
Oh, okay. So yeah. So it's like a
It's similar, but it's different too. They're a little bit different
Yeah,
builds.
in fact, the disease registry and population management tool that we're using that extracts out of our OCHIN Epic was actually developed by OCHIN, and so that's what we know and use.
But I know that Providence has a very robust way to gather patient data. Yeah.
I was asking because they've been, our state and others, offering community providers, not just health centers, but their
Oh.
community. I can't remember the name of it. We were just curious if that might be, OSHA might be something that they would offer, so we'll follow up.
Yeah, I don't know, but I can say that in our metro area, even in our state, having people on a similar medical record that I can actually see neighborhood health center, my patient went to neighborhood because they, were transferring from their care, I can see their stuff. It's been so helpful in not duplicating care and for identifying other issues.
Yes, no reporting, we're finding that
That is the bonus of this OCHIN version of Epic. It was actually developed in partnerships with, it was really community health centers who helped to create this. So that is really PDS reporting and capturing of all that required. You had something, and then Roke, you might have a contribution.
So on the previous data that you're putting on the study, is the staff entering that into the patient's chart in the EMR2?
Well, they're entering the call. So in the process, once they've reviewed the chart and they see that patient still needs whatever the outreach project is, they open a telephone encounter, and we have a process as to how they mark that, so that when we actually look at the patient's chart, you can see all of our outreach that's been done for the patient. And then they put the dot phrase in according to what happened. So yeah, it is actually duplicated.
And the workflow is very detailed around like what is the reason for call that they pick and some of these other things, so that for reporting purposes they are tracked and showing that this is the amount of like care coordination or clinical outreach that's being performed. Oh, Roke.
Yeah, I just, on the Providence question, what we found is that the Providence system is a proprietary system. They purchased the Epic software, and then they have modified it for their needs. Whereas OCHIN, which stood for Oregon Community Health Information Network, doesn't stand for it anymore. Its version of Epic is really health center driven, more so. So even though they're both Epic, one's more of a hospital-based system with clinics, and one is more of a outpatient with community health center as a focus on it. So they don't always work as well as it sounds like they would.
Yeah.
So how much of your time does this take to coordinate all of this?
So I work half-time. I'm half 0.5 FTE. And it depends on the project that we're doing and how it goes,
Do you have multiple projects going, like do you have colonoscopies and child immunizations all going at the same time?
And I have other things that I help in the clinic with. So I would say like the developmental screening one, which was bigger and more complex and a lot more sort of education for the staff, and that took longer just for us to roll out like the process. So sometimes when we're rolling out the process, the work of the three of us like deciding what that is and all the scripting and all that will all of a sudden consume a week of my time or a week and a half. And then when the project gets going, and especially now as we really work with people, it's really become a lot less because there's not the barriers of the staff struggling with doing it or coming up with reasons why they can't. So, yeah.
So looking at how we did a lot of our change management, we really had to do staff engagement, really big focus on the medical assistants and the back office staff and providers for actually buying into this type of work. And then also looking at morale, because our experience was that morale tanks when you do change. And there's a lot of pushback, and it's a big challenge. And so a big piece of this was involving the back office supervisor in our planning. We did start this monthly meeting with the medical assistants that was basically about education around quality, where our data was, really sharing the data. They didn't trust the data at first, and we actually had to, when we gave them reports about how they were doing, let's say around hypertension, like blood pressure rechecks, which I'll show you some data on. They didn't buy it. They were like, I'm checking that blood pressure, or, and we actually had to get a report written and give them the data, and they could then go back and look at that patient's chart to see, oh yeah, I didn't recheck that blood pressure. And so once they have buy-in now, but it was initially a big pushback. And so we started this monthly meeting. Part of that was a lot of education. We found that our medical assistants, while they had their training from their school, they didn't necessarily feel comfortable with a lot of disease states we talked about in the clinic when they were calling results to patients, and then patients would ask them questions like, your thyroid's normal, or your number's this. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And the medical assistant had no clue what that meant. And so it caused a lot of anxiety, and really, again, the pushback of doing that outreach, or the pushback of actually giving results, they're really resistant because it made them uncomfortable. So we focused a lot on education. We even gave them their own CME for that we gave them certificates if they were there participating. And so that was helpful too, but really a big focus on the education piece. We shared our quality data, we shared our improvements every month. We go over, this is where we were, and this is where we're at now. And we help try and identify what are some of the barriers. Like if we were improving and then we stopped improving, what happened? And so really to bring it back to people's attention, to give them more real-time data so we can look at workflows, look at who's forgetting this. We know it's an iceberg, and we know that penguins jump off those icebergs, everything we have. And so bringing those penguins back to that iceberg is a big key of this.
That picture for the slide.
It's a good idea.
Our patient advisor.
Yes. So we also have a patient advisory council that was started. We have real patients on this. We talk to them, it's every other month, and basically talking about things we want to do in the clinic, kind of run ideas past them, kind of as a focus group. What are your thoughts about this? How would you feel as a patient if you're receiving these telephone calls and outreach? Some people get annoyed with it. We look at it as being proactive care, not reactive care. And so we also have a health literacy committee that's focused, one of our providers, a big health literacy person, and we try and run most of our stuff that's going to go towards patients through that committee to make it in patient-friendly language so everyone's understanding everything. So one of the big pieces here is getting providers on board and getting providers data. So at provider meetings, we meet twice a month. We will give them their data for a kind of a 2-week look back, just to say, how are you doing with this outreach process, or how are you doing with focusing on this? And so this is a colorectal cancer screening that we did. And let's look at provider PCP number 6. And so what you're seeing here is that in that 2-week period, they saw 40 patients in the clinic that were age eligible for, let's say, colorectal cancer screening. And 35 of those people were already up to date. They had a colonoscopy, they had a FIT test that was already in, but they missed 5 opportunities to discuss that with a patient, or patient decline, but it's oftentimes just missed. And so giving this data to our providers helps them get an idea of where they are compared to their peers. And we find that of all the data that we give, has everyone's data on it. There's a bit of this peer pressure to say, I'm doing the same job as you, but I'm doing awesome. You're not doing so good. And there is this little competition
So it's
there.
not blinded?
It's not blinded. We don't do that with our MAs either. They wanted it blinded at first. Yeah, they don't want it because they feel uncomfortable, okay? you can do a great job or you can do not a great job.
Or
And
we're seeing people sharing kind of best practices too, like
Yeah.
a writer will say, my MA is just doing that like 90% of the time, like I really don't have anything too much to do with it.
And sharing that information in provider meetings or with our MA meeting that we do really helps drive that change where other providers are like, gosh, I guess I should ask my MA to do this as well because these MAs are doing that too. And so it is driving that process.
The clinic where I am, we have outpatient visits 50% roughly is made up by our own employees. So we struggle with the engagement with the residents, even giving them this type of data, but also that feedback and, just kind of even being in the loop the same way our own FTE providers are. So can you speak to how you engage your residents?
Yeah, we've also initially struggled with this as well, and we are in that improvement process. I think identifying whoever's your chief resident and getting them on board with quality stuff, we started inviting that chief to our meetings. They can't always come, but we always put out some minutes about our meetings, so they're kept in the loop. And then they have monthly conference that they are now starting to go over all their quality data. So we get their quality data, they go over it there. Sometimes the residents can make it to our provider meetings to get their data, but sometimes they have other commitments going on that it's hard. And it is a challenge. And we were just doing the math even last night that the residents, we have 12 residents, and they only, their panels by the time they graduate is like 200 to 300. But that's actually 3,000 patients. And if you see we have 12,000 plus patients, that's a huge percentage of our patients that we're potentially missing if we don't include the residents. Yeah.
With our residency clinic, what we've done is empowered the MAs. We have standing orders for many of these quality measures, and the MAs become the driving force to teach the residents and give that.
Do you find that it happens successfully, that your MAs are engaged to do that?
MAs are, if they are motivated by recognition.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we also find that we have some stellar people in the MA pool, and we have some people that are, just there for the paycheck and not really engaged in quality, and that's just the reality. And so when we've relied upon just them to drive it, it doesn't tend to happen for us.
But we were talking about that also just recently, is how to kind of keep moving in that direction more so that it is really empowering the MAs or, all staff to take that role. And we also were like, wow, how much the residents that they are involved in the, residents learning. So
this is just a little visual as well, but basically looking at where, just looking at all these different venues where we do reporting to people. So we have our huddles in the morning with all staff that are there in the morning, where we might focus on one measure for the week and reminding people, say, remember, we're focusing on this. We have pod meetings every 6 weeks where we kind of go over that, MA provider reports. We have a visual management board that we'll put up quality data on, so that patients can see it, staff can see it, and then we have our other groups, our MA group, management team, QI stuff, where we are now driving QI stuff with all of these groups, and that's a big change for us.
So another tool that's really been helping in our performance measurement and monitoring, as well as acting as an engagement tool and really kind of educational tool also. This is what we call a performance measure scorecard that's just really, quick at-a-glance tool that has the measure that we're tracking. The next 4 columns are the places that we're accountable to for performance or that we're reporting out to. So UDS is on there, our pay for performance program, the state's alternative payment methodology, and then there's just a quick where were we at in the prior quarter, what is the current quarter's performance, and then our board actually helped us come up with a little visual of the green arrow, the red arrow, a gold star if the target was hit or exceeded. So this has been really helpful. We review this with our board's quality committee and then, all the way down on a quarterly basis. And this is a nice way of keeping these things because this list is about 35 measures long, so not anything uncommon for anybody in the room.
What's that?
Oh.
What makes that list?
Oh, what? Me and an intern. So it is. So we pull from all the various different, pieces of, other places that we're reporting and just plug them in here on a quarterly basis only.
So I'm going to start with this. This was our first outreach measure that we did. It was looking at trying to get hypertension under better control. You can see out of all of our patients diagnosed with hypertension when we started April 14, we were at 64% of our patients with a diagnosis of hypertension were under control. Not so great, and it's a hard one to get. And there's national standards. If you can get above 70%, there's national recognition for this. And that was our goal. And what we learned a lot throughout this process. And what we started initially was we knew that our patients were coming in off the bus. They were stressed. The first blood pressure was often inaccurate, but was never rechecked. And so we started a recheck process that took some time for buy-in and stuff. Those reports we talked about, that we now give the medical assistants a report every 2 weeks that shows their rechecks. We were asking for 80% of those patients that are out of control in their blood pressure to be rechecked. If they're not, there's active coaching that goes on with their supervisor.
You say recheck, you like 10 minutes later or 1 day?
2 to 10 minutes. We give a range. So start with your blood pressure, do your other vitals, go over your med level, check that blood pressure. Okay? And it is a provider MA team piece. Sometimes MAs just forget, or they're busy, or the provider's barging in the door and they can't happen. And so we've had to kind of get our providers on board as well with this because they were like, you're taking up valuable visit time for me. But they have liked the improvement and they're on board now. So what we found is that we started this standard recheck process. And you can see, just by bringing it up, we peaked here, and we were like, wow, things are going great. And then it started jumping, that penguin jumped off because there was something else going on, and people stopped their recheck. So we said, why are we failing at this? We need this report. We got this report, and you can see we kind of bounced along and really learned that we were hopeful that once we had initial successes, that we would be able to just kind of move on to the next thing, and it wasn't so. We really had to keep bringing the message home over and over and over again. We find even now, if we drop that message, which we did recently, just because everyone was doing so well, we had everyone in the 90 to 100% of rechecking blood pressures. And we were doing so well. We would say, this is really accurate data, PCPs, now change the meds. Really address that blood pressure with that patient. And we just started noticing, again, a drop-off in the medical assistants rechecking those blood pressures because we stopped giving the coaching feedback just as an experiment, really, to see, is this going to stick? You would have to really give that data consistently. But with the coaching process and with PCPs being on board, you can see we just ended at 71.9%. The last 3 months, we have actually been in the 70% mark. We've met our goal, and we're looking for that federal recognition now.
And this was one of those topics that we did an education session with the MAs to really give them a better understanding of why, what is it that hypertension can do if your blood pressure is consistently out of control. So that was a nice example.
We also did a phone outreach, so it was like just these multi-steps. So we also brought patients in that maybe hadn't come in or hadn't come back for their follow-up
Oh yeah,
visits.
true. So they're here in the middle. That was they made that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically what,
Uncontrolled.
initially we did this blood pressure recheck, and then we started an outreach process where we ran the data and said, which one of our patients with hypertension has blood pressure that's high? But, or do we just run it
And have not been in the so many months.
Yeah, and so then everyone got their list of 5 that they did their outreach process, and they called people in. We started seeing those people come in, and our numbers went down, which you would expect. But then you can see we started rebounding and we're getting people's blood pressures under control. And so, but the education piece was key. They didn't know what high blood pressure was. Like, they didn't know the downstream effects of that. And so doing a good education about that. I still hear medical assistants with a patient saying, or the patient says to me, "That medical assistant told me that every pound of fat I have has 7 miles of blood vessels in it. And if I lose that, then my pressure will go down." I was like, "You're right." And that's one of the things we taught them. And you hear it in the clinic, and it really stuck for them. So that was you can see we've been successful with this. Colon cancer screening, our rates were at 35%. We did initially just seeing patients in the clinic. We were like, our rates are so not great in terms of getting our patient population screened that just the number of patients coming in that are 50 and older, we're going to be able to hit our measure. This red line's the measure, our 3% measure. We're going to be able to do that. And bring it to provider attention and giving them reports saying, you're only addressing this 40% of the time, basically, and then seeing that, you can see this automatic, it was everyone's attention to this. We fit testing and we started doing outreach. We gave you a fit test, we didn't get it back, we ran a report who didn't send theirs back in, and then those people went on our outreach call list, and the medical assistants were making those call lists. And you can see we have ended now at just about 49%, and we're about to start a second outreach on this where we run data on who's eligible and who doesn't come into the clinic. And that's going to be all phone outreach to try and do colonoscopies and fit testing.
And the fit tests that we're using, the patients can mail the samples right into the lab. We had switched from like the old FOBT tests at the start of the year. So we've had a lot better compliance with the test. And in this case, when we do the outreach, we'll call them up, make sure the patient's agreeable to doing it at home. We'll mail it out with the whole kit, and then they'll do the same thing as if they were in the clinic, send it back into the lab. So we're hopeful. Question?
Are you able to incentivize patients for completing their screening?
There have been some cases, especially Care Oregon, our big payer, has been doing some gift card incentives.
Mostly for adolescent visits. They're a very hard group to get in. And so if they come in for their adolescent visit, they get a $10 Subway or $10 Amazon gift card, basically. So here's our adolescent well visits. We were at 38% when we started this, okay? We knew this is a hard group to get in. You call them in, they no-show. They still no-show whenever we call them in at that big percentage. So we started looking at converting visits where they're coming in for an acute visit and they're due for an adolescent well visit. We attempt to convert it, whether it's asking permission of the parent, whether it's asking, hey, do you have time to go over this? We can do everything plus your acute visit. And you can see it's been very successful. We've used our team coordinators also to pre-scrub for anyone coming in for the clinic that week that meets that kind of age parameter, and they will write on the visit note, WCC due, and that allows the provider and the medical assistant to say, oh yeah, I can do a well visit for this. And so we just ended at 78.9% of our patients in this age range that have had a well visit.
Do you have a standard method of how long an exam is? 20 minutes?
We do 20-minute visits.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
Every week?
Except for maybe IUD insertions.
These next couple, this is our annual screening for SBIRT. And so for us, what we've done is have kind of a universal screen that starts off with a 2-question screen to see if there's a positive that would require the patient answering the audit or the DAST. So in this case, this was really around development that we worked with in our OCHN version of Epic, where there was a standard workflow developed. It started to get a bit better, but once we implemented one of these dot phrases again that required the providers to use those on a consistent basis, we've really started to see some steady improvement. So that was really just all about good use of the EMR. We had a pretty decent process in place for actually getting that survey, tool into the hands of the patient prior to that. Same thing with this depression screening, using the EMR the best way that we could, that now includes a health maintenance reminder that the front office sees when they're checking in a patient, so that's their flag of giving the survey and a little confidential binder that they fill out and then give to the medical assistant. If it's positive, the MA will give the follow-up, so the PHQ-9 in this case, or the audit or the DAST, and explain that the provider would like them to fill this out, and they do that then in the exam room, and it stays there in this little special folder thing, again, that the provider comes in and will address. And MA enters in all of the results.
As needed, I would say. It's really about the provider recognizing that it's been done, putting in whatever attestation statement in their note that needs to happen, and addressing it with the patient, and just kind of a brief intervention. Yeah.
So we had a plan.
Yeah. Do you?
No, I think we're going to show another one of our tools, and probably just use the rest of our time for questions, but maybe just walk through this tool a little bit. But in using this, we've used this tool to help us really think about aligning with opportunities for participating in those pay-for-performance opportunities, but also supporting our population health initiatives. Oh, shoot, sorry, it's a different document. Sorry. Oh, I'm not sure if we're actually going to have time for this. What should we do?
Yeah, there's one on every table.
Yeah, let's do that.
We have a couple more.
Yeah.
We need some help. This is just kind of an idea of what we can use.
Is this one slides?
We could upload it. It's not in there. Oh yes, we will. We'll upload the slides actually should be uploaded, but we'll make sure that the most current. Oh my gosh, how rude. We did not mean that.
Sometimes it takes a few days to get also get. Yeah, but it says specifically that.
Well, we can share our slides.
Yeah.
Do you want to just do a brief talk about that, and then I'll just.
Okay. So this document is just a table that is kind of looks like something we showed earlier that talks about what is this measure that we're going to start improving, tracking, what's the current performance, what is the target that we want to get to, and then helps to then plan out some of the next steps around what are the process improvements or changes that we need to make. And a little bit of thinking about what might be some of the barriers and then solutions to those barriers. So we'll definitely upload that too.
Yeah.
But it's been a great tool for us, especially in kind of planning out over the course of a 6-month year or period or a year to just kind of align like, okay, what's going to be happening when, looking at how many of these kind of big changes are we going to be making at once, the staff roles and the other parts of the system that'll be impacted.
So I think that in terms of just finishing up and wrapping up before we take questions, just the next steps for you to think about in looking at your QI improvement process is really looking at a strategy, really embedding this QI process in your strategic plan so that everyone is on board and that can help drive you, your board's on board, and it can help drive that and disseminating that information amongst the staff. Engaging with the staff with improvements, it takes some time. There's a lot of pushback, but it really pays off if you have a consistent message with appropriate coaching that you're serious about change and that this change is good for our patients. And then building relationships with your payers. If you have incentive pay for performance stuff going on, utilize it. You know, it really can end up being some great revenue to reinvest in your clinic. And if you don't have that, maybe attempting to have a conversation with your payers about quality improvement. You know, it's better health for your patients, it's lower costs for them generally in the long run, and so they have incentives for that. So we want to take questions, and also we want to say that we like to travel, and if you need help with any of this stuff, please come talk to us, okay? We're only here through lunchtime today, so come talk to us. Questions?
Just, the improvements are dramatic, excellent work, good job. I'm wondering, you're at the end of that kind of initial start, and now some real challenges begin further now. So do you have some hints about where you're going or what you're thinking next in terms of getting those changes that are going to be a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, initially when you're doing these changes with incentive stuff, it's, you know, you hit these changes with doing, you know, EMR, EHR population, and it gets hard when you have to start doing this work and working on workflows. And we initially, when this team was built, basically, we had hit those places. We were successful, but now the real work begins. And so in terms of doing this, I think having the meetings that we have, medical assistants, providers, having the data available for them and consistently driving that message home is a big key for this. This is the end of that improvement cycle, basically. But we've been doing this for 2 years, and you can see that it's really paying off. So we feel like it has been something that's institutionalized now in terms of our process when we are engaged with all of our staff.
So it really does hinge on the continuous monitoring, giving the feedback, and we've been doing a lot more work, especially with our front office and our back office supervisors, to really get them fully up to speed on how much we need their support and keeping them really understanding, you know, why are these things important and why is it important that we don't let them drop off. So it really is about, like, this is just our way of doing business now. So the standard of care for, you know, the colorectal cancer screening is this, and this is how we know on a, you know, every 2-week basis what our internal performance is looking like and how we give that feedback. And then working with individuals as needed to develop a plan to address any barriers that they're having. And also to be a little, like, more transparent, there was one of these monthly meetings we had where I kind of went over the whole feedback loop with the MAs just to get everybody understanding this was not about, you know, disciplining people, but at the end of my little walkthrough, I did make some sort of comment about, you know, and if this becomes a pattern that, you know, there are no other barriers to address and it's just purely lack of performance or unwillingness to adhere to the standards, we would, whatever I said around, you know, doing something about it. And there was a big uproar. You know, the message was, oh, great, now we're all fired. So I think by kind of taking this slowly and doing a lot, probably doing way more coaching than is required, it's gotten people into the groove of this is how we do this. We should all be giving each other feedback anyway. But a lot of this weekly or bi-weekly sharing of performance.
I think we've also talked about how if we're moving on to new measures this upcoming year, that we will still keep the measures we've been working on are part of our cycle of outreach. And so our goal is just getting bigger so that those things continue to grow and we're not dropping them. And we continue to keep looking at that outreach work for that. No, then what do we do? What's another approach to get to those people? So we're not going to let it fall off the radar.
Work it into the calendar.
And we said all keep getting bigger, so how do you keep staff engaged? I mean, I found that they reach a saturation point, so less people at UDS getting larger and larger, we do all these things, but nothing can ever drop off because of, you know, the expectations that we have, so there's a point where we're communicating with staff and they're not even really adjusting the information anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's just another initiative.
Yeah.
Your data says that you somehow cleared that barrier.
Yeah, I mean, we have, and it's always a constant work in progress.
I'd say, and we didn't touch a lot on it, but the monthly meeting that happens with the back office staff, and particularly like Dan and Erin taking that time to meet with the back office staff, I think, like from my perspective as a nurse, has been invaluable. The difference between what those meetings looked like a year ago and what they look like now, for the majority of people interactive, they're sort of a part of the process. They understand what quality measures we're working on and why that's important for our patients. They have a provider who's actually taken the time out of his day, who's there trying to be a team builder with them. And though Dan has probably taken some of the hit for, as we made some of those changes, I think for the majority of our back office staff, they've seen that as like they have value and they're a part of the process. And I think that their work on that is really helpful.
We put in the slide, there is this link to this activity that has been really fun and helpful for us called game storming. It's just a brainstorming process, but we use this with the MAs to help them work through some of the barriers they were having around these things that have been in our workflows for now a long time. So we just used part of one of these meetings to take the opportunity to do this in this game, kind of card game way. And that was, like, if I could have, thinking back, like if we would have thought about how, like, just super valuable that turned out to be, it would have been nice to record part of it to see how interactive people were. They were coming up with their own solutions to these barriers that they were all sharing, and then they quickly got group consensus around, like, okay, we're gonna do that thing about that. It's been driving us nuts forever. And they also know that this monthly meeting is a venue for them to come and bring their stuff in, not a completely complaining sort of way.
So I hear you guys saying a lot about back office and MAs and everything. Where do the providers fall in this process?
Yeah, so I mean, at the provider meetings, quality is now a standing item that we discuss. People get their reports, we talk about them, we talk about the workflows, who's having successes. You can see it by the data, who's in the 90% of getting their stuff completed and who's not. And we ask them, what are you doing? And oftentimes it's really about the communication with the medical assistant, knowing that they're all on board.
So are they involved in these back office meetings that you guys are talking about?
No.
No.
Why not?
It's kind of like, good question.
I think it's a safe, it's a safe time.
It's the MA's time to talk about whatever they want to. And for us, Dan does education with them. There's celebration of meeting measures. Erin keeps them. I mean, so really, for me, when I look at sort of what's changed in the clinic, people didn't used to know about there was really a core people who sort of knew, and emails went out that no one read about the measures and stuff, right? But now the MAs, they know what they are. Most of them are really actively participating in them. Some of them help some of their providers by taking lists on other things that their patients need and doing outreach for those. So I think it's really it's been a real time to build it up. And they wouldn't want providers. They would then again feel like there was a hierarchy. This is all about.
And they wouldn't speak up
right
about their questions, what they don't understand. And I think that's the biggest piece to recognize is that our medical assistants, just their education level, didn't match where we needed them to be. And so we had to raise the bar for them, and we had to teach them to bring that up because their anxiety level basically was the barrier from them participating in patient care. So.
How do you manage to get everyone together to these extended hours? I'm assuming you guys do extended hours. So we're doing 10-hour shifts.
Yeah. Yep.
Some of them work Saturdays. And since we started this a year ago, my meetings have went from once a month to hit this, getting everybody there as much as possible. So I'm thinking about going to 7 o'clock in the morning, or at 5 o'clock, or 6 o'clock at night. So I don't know.
We use lunchtime, where our clinic is closed during lunch.
That works if they're not on one of their 10-hour shifts or working.
We pay them.
Yeah,
We pay them for their meeting.
And we give them, we usually buy lunch a lot. So it would be using that lunch hour or whatever it is. And then in many cases, then those people on the 10s or 12s still have their scheduled lunch some other, regular time during the day. But I get where you're going because they could be like responsible for working with a provider during that time or
So we don't get 100%.
yeah.
Okay.
We don't, because we have some people that don't work on those Wednesdays.
Yeah.
We talk to them, we send out minutes, emails, and then usually the back office supervisor will check in with them to see if they have any questions. Because it's only a couple people that can't make it.
And generally, though, there is some time where, you know, they end up flowing through, you know, the one meeting sometimes.
Probably